Okay, good morning, folks. Okay, we will try one more time. Good morning. Thank you. So, today we'll talk about the seamless distributed enterprise, right? And in many ways, something that you are living through, but in many ways, it's something that is going to continuously change, right? There are two parts of this seamless distributed enterprise. There's the distributed enterprise part of it, but there's the seamless part of it I want to also pay a bit more attention to, right? So starting from a memory lane, a bit going back, good olden days, nice good fence around the infrastructure, you know who goes through, there's only a few doors to open, we can live with that. But unfortunately, as things start changing, you start introducing the cloud applications there. The infrastructure starts opening up. More number of people are starting to interact with the infrastructure. There's a mobile workforce that's also starting to come in. And any of the folks that were there in the discussion yesterday, we can tell stories about how complicated even this infrastructure is. But as things are progressing, unfortunately, even this one is not good enough because that wall that used to be there, that used to protect the infrastructure, now starts disappearing. Infrastructure is now starting to move to different parts, whether it is because of the business expansion, going to multiple locations across the globe, or multiple locations across the country itself. Now, to complicate things, the last 3 years, the employees also start moving out. So when we're looking at the infrastructure that needs to be managed, there is the infrastructure part, the back server, the storage, the network part of it, and then the client devices part of it. So the employees start moving out. Now, this is complicated, but this is what I want to, because I was trying to figure out what exactly is the statement that I should mention once I say that, okay, it is complicated, so what next? Whatever is we have seen, whatever complications, changes, transformation that we have seen is only going to be just a starting point for what's coming up. The client devices and the devices, whether it's the customer devices, are not limited to the traditional devices anymore. Forget about the PCs, forget about the tabs. You have the IoT sensors, IoT devices that are sitting around. End of the day, we have to manage those pieces too. So what we have seen happen in the market is the businesses have started realizing what exactly can be done. The kind of flexibility that they can expect from the infrastructure, both the back-end infrastructure and the front-end infrastructure. Then the employees started realizing what can be done. They started realizing that I don't need to be in the office. I can actually work from wherever I want to. Right? And hence the discussions that are happening right now, where companies are saying, no, everybody has to come back in, and employees saying, no, I'm not going to be coming back in. So if you want to find somebody else, please feel free to find somebody else. So employees start realizing what exactly is possible, and that good olden days of having to come to the office is not a requirement. Then the customers have started realizing what can be done. What can be delivered online? What can be tracked online? How it can be integrated in the back end so that the information and the interaction with the customer can be one single interaction that we have about the customer itself. So we literally have opened the Pandora's box, for lack of a better word. Businesses know what they can expect. Employees know what they can expect. Customers know what they can expect. So we started looking at what are the challenges that this creates. If you look at one of the things that happens, and I always struggle nowadays between there is a customer endpoint and there is an employee endpoint. And is there a difference between the two? There is enough information being collected from the customer also that we need to be careful about what we do with that information. So the endpoints are going every single place. One of the discussions I was having with my colleague is, I put an India map and I started to put devices across India, and she said, "Venu, why the hell are you limiting this to India?" True, it is not limited to India. The employee technically can be sitting anywhere and still be working, so can the customers be anywhere and they still can be expecting the services. So, scaling of the endpoints of it, provisioning of the endpoints. The good olden days, come pick up the laptop, not going to happen. The provision is starting to change. How are you going to do that? How are you going to manage that? How are you going to get the right applications to and the right devices to the customer itself? Especially when you come to the end customer part of it and the IoT devices part of it, another key question starts coming up about the data. What do you collect? What do you keep? Where do you keep? What do you transmit to the core? What do you collect? What do you keep? Where do you keep? And what do you transmit to the core? And then you have the very interesting question of security then and the compliance. If you collect the information because you want to process and try to give the most customized information, customized service back to the employee or back to the customer, what is the exposure back on us? All of these challenges, despite the fact that they are something that you are working with in some form or the other, just got complicated by so much more. Right? And as I said, whatever you have seen until now, and whatever these challenges that we are listing out, it's going to get worse, it's not going to get simpler. Right? So, how exactly are we supposed to handle this? A few key trends that I'm going to list out, and then we'll come into the recommendations itself. We started, as part of our research, we started getting an understanding of the technology modernization investments that are happening in India. Right? Data and AI came up at the top. In one sense, it is logical. Yes, there's a lot of data being collected, a lot of intelligence that need to be happening with the data itself so that you can do some customization. But one thing that we did notice that is very different for India. The infrastructure modernization, which comes about fourth in this list, in most of the countries across Asia Pacific, it has been coming quite regularly at the top. Now, the question that we need to ask ourselves is, if we are talking about data and AI, without really addressing the infrastructure modernization and the cloud infrastructure modernization, are we putting ourselves in a place where we'll have to go back and relook at the data and AI architecture and all the guidelines and the rules that we are putting there? So, needless to say, at least my personal belief is there is a lot more infrastructure focus that needs to be coming in, because that sets the framework for you to really get to whatever other investments that you want to do. Now, when I say infrastructure investments, I do want to also call out that it is not just the infrastructure investments in the traditional infrastructure, but even the cloud discussion has to come up, and it has to come up at the same time itself. Then we started asking the question about why cloud needs to be part of the grid infrastructure, right? And when we started looking at that, and we started trying to figure out how exactly that cloud migration is happening, lift and shift is at the bottom of the list. That's not the top of the process itself. But the most critical one is the operating individual workloads. Even in the discussions yesterday, a lot of people are still looking at individual workloads itself and trying to migrate individual workloads only. Right? Now, that is a key step, but that is not obviously where you will be ending up. At some point, you will be looking at the next set of applications that require, as some of you said, the API discussions, the interoperability discussions between the applications itself. What stays on the cloud, what does not stay on the cloud. How do those talk to each other? All of those discussions starts coming in. So, infrastructure, a big part of it. Irrespective of how personally I feel about going back to office, the reality is hybrid work is going to be there. The pendulum has started swinging back. We have not come to the point where we know exactly what we are looking at, but that pendulum will swing for a little more time, in my opinion. And at some point, it's going to stop, but somewhere it will be around the flexible work itself. We're not going to get to everybody coming to the office, guaranteed. And I'm assuming that it's not going to be all working from home. So that reality, the reason why that is important is, once again, the back-end infrastructure also need to be, and the security needs to be also done and architected in such a way that you cater for that distributed workplace itself. The third, and for you guys, most probably the most emotional part of the discussion, is the management of the infrastructure itself. The infrastructure management will still see a whole lot of tool sets that need to be coming in that will help you in your infrastructure management itself. But at the same time, your thinking process on what exactly the business is expecting, how exactly you are going to be managing it, how many applications you are going to put on which cloud, and why. All of those discussions still need to be happening. So the tools and the management discussion is still open. Tools and management discussion is something that will still take a lot of time, especially because of the multi-cloud and also the on-premise infrastructure that is getting distributed in so many different places itself. While the back-end infrastructure management is one thing, then we have the endpoint management itself. A couple of times when I was starting to talk to a few of my friends about this, the whole discussion about bring your own device somehow slowly starts creeping back in. Now, is that a good thing or a bad thing? How exactly you want to handle it is something that will depend upon your company's culture itself. But the reality is, you have to figure out how to manage it. And one of the terms that Sash keeps using, and I love the phrase itself, is office of one. Anybody working from home has to be treated as an office location itself, with the security, with all of the other services that you are going to provide, and the support, as if it is an office of one. So there's going to be a lot of these home offices. There's a lot of branch offices that are going to be coming up. A lot of organizations are investing in co-location spaces. Even the co-location contracts, I get to see very interesting contracts being built, and we can talk about that at leisure. Then the IoT devices that are out there, the customer devices that are out there, all of these endpoint management is one of the things that you will continue to invest in. And I think even here, the number of management tools that are there still need to morph a lot more, because I don't think we are at the point where the IoT devices, the desktops or the tablets and the mobile phones can all be managed seamlessly across the board. And I'm sure each one of you can tell me stories about the fun that you're having with the skills and the rescaling part. One of the most common discussions that I keep seeing is how you go out and try to find a skill and end up paying 20%, 30% higher than what they used to get or what they're currently getting and try to get them on board. In many ways, that is not, from a business point of view, sustainable forever, right? At some point, you have to say, boss, I don't have the money to keep paying 30% more. Then the question comes up on reskilling. And yesterday, during one of the discussions, an important point came up. Fine, you reskill. You basically are preparing the person to be poached. Right? You basically are saying, okay, we'll make you a lot more valuable. Are you going to leave now? Happens. You cannot control that. So what are the other motivations you have to think about to try to limit that as much as possible? And that happens both on the management and infrastructure side, the support side, and also on the development side itself. In many ways, this discussion is going to still continue, and in many ways, I also see the last box, relying on a third party, starting to look, at least on a tactical basis, as an option that many vendors are looking at. Until we get a control over how things are going to be, let's try to rely on a third party, then we'll come back and revisit this. I don't think there is a single right strategy for it, but worth looking at. Now, let me try to summarize the points that we discussed. They will get distributed. They will continue to be more and more distributed. Offices are going to be getting smaller and smaller. The good olden days of 20,000, 30,000 seaters, I think, are slowly starting to decrease. Cloud will be part of every single discussion, so will the endpoint devices, IoT devices that are out there. How are you going to manage them is going to be a big question. And if I ask 10 people, I'm sure there are going to be at least 9 different answers, if not 10 different answers. So we still have to figure that part out. No recommendation is, or recommendation list is complete without a point about security. When this whole infrastructure is changing so rapidly, how do you make sure that you are staying and baking security into that changes of infrastructure itself? So folks, there is a lot of transformation that is happening in the market. The reality is whatever points that we have touched are really a broad key trends that we are talking about. In each one of the slides, each one of the points, I think we can keep talking for a few hours. But as I said, hopefully it gives you a perspective, it gives you a point of view that you can sort of dig deeper and have conversations both internally and externally and try to build a strategy around that. So thank you so much. Looking forward to continuing the interaction, and I'm sure there's going to be some interesting questions that are going to be popping up for